Just implemented our up and down movements with our keyboard arrow keys, and we've made sure that our character can't actually go off the screen either at the top or the bottom. And we did this using our Y coordinates, our Y values, and implementing an if statement to make sure that it stayed in the range of the screen. Now, as promised at the end of the last video, today we're going to implement a shooting mechanism. So before we do it, let's just think. Our shooting is basically going to be, at this point, just a little bullet coming out from roughly the front of our little ship here. It's going to move across to the right-hand side of the screen. There's nothing to kill at the moment or to try and destroy. We're just literally going to get to shoot, and we're going to use the space bar at this point to make that work. So let's get into it. Currently, our player object has two events, the up arrow and the down arrow key. Let's add another key, and this time we'll use the space bar, as I said. Okay, and what we're going to end up doing is write some code here to actually make that shoot. Before we can do that, of course, we're going to need to create an actual sprite for our bullet, and we're also going to then create an object for that sprite to be. So let's start by creating a new sprite. I usually always name it first away, so it's SPR, we'll just call it bullet. Now, this is actually going to just be a really tiny sprite, so it really would be best to change the size here. I'm going to go half this size in this case, so 32 by 32. I really could go probably smaller again, but let's just go with that. We'll zoom it in though so we can actually see it a bit better. Alright, there we go. So that's giving us a bit more to look at. I'll set the origin of this to the actual center, so middle center, just saves time trying to guess. And we'll very quickly just draw a very, very simple, I'm not even going to draw anything fancy at all, I'm just going to draw rectangle shape in yellow, and I'm just going to stick a single, remember this is zoomed in a lot if I go to the actual size, and we can just close this down now. So we're not quite on center, so let's just move it a little bit across because I didn't quite draw it center. So that's our bullet sprite, nothing special. We're going to create an object for it. So again, I'm going to call this obj bullet, and I'm going to tell it to use that sprite that I just made. And again, there's nothing special about this at this point. All right, we could, in theory, now go into our room. We could take one of these bullets and stick it in, and that's basically what it's going to look like, that sort of square there. Let's move it over a bit more, and you can sort of see the scale of it compared to the ship. So at the moment, yep, we've got a bullet, but of course it doesn't do anything, and it certainly doesn't act like a bullet yet. So let's take this one step at a time. When our bullet is created, we want it to fly across the screen towards the right. Now, unlike our ship, which is not really moving, we're giving the impression of movement because of the background moving, we do in fact need this to move. So in our bullet object, we're going to add an event, and we're going to use for the first time this special event called create. Now the create event happens the first time any object is created in our room. So anytime we have one of these added into our room, it does the code in here. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to set another built-in variable called speed, and we're going to give that a value. Now the value I'm going to choose at the moment is going to be 10, so that it will move at a speed of 10. Now, something to know about GameMaker, everything by default starts at a direction or a position facing 0. And a little bit like compasses, we go through the degrees all the way around the screen. But again, we have a little bit of a difference. So let me just pop back to the room for a sec. If we think about a normal object, and if we were doing compasses, positions, we would say north would be 0 degrees or 360, and would move around the objects getting to 90 degrees facing to the right, 180, 270, and then set back to 0 or 360. But in GameMaker, everything defaults facing towards the right, and that is 0 degrees, and then it actually goes around the other way. So straight up is 90, backwards is 180, and down is 270. Now, what that means is when an object is first created, so when this bullet first creates, it starts by facing in the direction of 0. So we're already facing towards the right, which is good for us. So if we just say a speed of 5, it technically starts moving in the way it's direction, or the way it's facing, at a speed of 5. So it's going to move towards the right-hand side. If we had have changed the direction of this, so let's say we had a direction of 90, which would mean it was facing straight up, and then we set a speed of 5, it would move in that direction. If you've never talked about vectors before, basically that's something to consider. So when you talk about a vector, you talk about the direction and the magnitude. So the direction being which way it's facing in this case, and the magnitude is how much it's doing, so the speed of it. This is something that will come up again later on, but for now, we're just lucky that everything starts by facing 0 in that direction there. So, back to our bullet for a second. We've set a speed of 10 actually, which will be pretty fast. We do want bullets to go pretty fast. So let's just see how that works. And it's going to work because I have put one in the room. So as soon as this game runs, we should see our bullet seem to shoot quite quickly across to the right-hand side. And there goes our bullet. Okay. Of course, we still aren't actually shooting them. We had one just in the room and it went, but it wasn't actually shot by us. But what's important here is that when a bullet is made, it knows to start moving across the right-hand side of the screen, because the create event, which happens when it's first created, hence the name, sets the speed to 10. I'm actually going to maybe make it a bit faster. I might make that 15. Okay, our next step. We actually want our player to now create the object when we press the spacebar. So we've got our space key down event, but what we want is to create an object on the fly. So not actually put it in the room ourselves when we're designing like here, but actually have it happen while the game is running. So when we create one, we're actually creating what we call an instance. So it's one particular copy of that object, because of course you can often have more than one of an object. We can certainly have more than one bullet on the screen at a time. So what we are going to do is run a new command. I'll just actually might fit this in our screen. And it's a command called instance create. All right, and we're going to use this layer one here. Now the layers refer to these layers on the left here. And again, as we start to put it in, we need to put the right values in. So it first asked for an X and a Y position for this instance to be created. Now we are in the spaceship, the object player at the moment. So if we talk about the X and the Y, we're talking about the current X and Y position of this spaceship, this particular object. And that's fine for the moment for our particular case. We're going to create this bullet at the same position as our ship is right now. Now it's a little bit hard to see, but down the bottom here it's showing you what other values you need to provide. So the next thing we need to provide is the name of the layer that they're going to go onto. And it can't go on a background layer, so we'll just use our instances layer for now. So we're just going to write that in. Oops, sorry, I think that actually has to be in quote marks. Okay, yep, that's better. The next thing we need is the name of the object, and that is the name that we gave it when we created it. So it's going to be obj bullet, and we've got our bracket closed, and that should be correct. So what this now says is when the spacebar is held down, we will create an instance on a layer at the X and Y position for where we are now, being the player object, on the instances layer, and it's going to be the object bullet that we actually create. So let's see if that works. So remember, we've still got one in the game that we haven't actually taken out of the room, so we will see one bullet fly across the screen. So that one's gone. Now I'm going to press my space bar, and there is a bullet. Now, the problem is if I hold this down, I've got this infinite stream of bullets, which is probably not what I want straight away. So how do we get around that? Basically, we're going to create a bit of a cooldown sequence for our bullets. We're going to essentially put a timer in that stops them from going just infinitely. How are we going to do that? All right, so back in our object, we're going to create, we're going to add a create event for this player, because we want to set some things up when the player first starts existing. And what we're going to start is a variable, and that's going to keep track of whether or not the player is allowed to shoot a bullet. So I'm going to call this can shoot. Now this is not a built-in variable, this is now one that we're creating, so we can just type the name, and I'm going to equal it to true. All right, so basically what this is saying is when the player object is created, a variable called can shoot is also created, and it starts with the value of true. Okay, this is important because what we're now going to do is go back to our space bar, and instead of just automatically making a bullet, we're going to ask another if question. And we're going to say if, and I said I'll just set it all up as we normally do. So open the curly braces, close it, else if we need it, open curly braces, close. So our condition is going to be if can shoot equals true. Okay. Now, it's important that we've used the double equals to say equivalence. If we just did a single equals, that's just like an equation. We're saying can shoot is actually equal to true. We're setting the value. We need the double equals sign to talk about the equivalence of. So is can shoot the same as true? If it is the same, we want to do what we were already doing. So we'll just cut that from here and we'll put it in the true section. So we'll create a bullet. What we now want to do is set our can shoot to be equal to false, if I can spell. Now, not cat shoot, can shoot. All right, so what does that do for us? So as soon as we create this bullet here, we'll now set the can shoot to false. So the very next time it checks the space bar, it comes back and says, hey, is can shoot equal to true? And we're now going to say, it's equal to false. So we're not going to do this. We're going to come down to the else. Do we still need an else? Well, let's check it out and see in a moment. Issue with this, it's only going to allow us to shoot one bullet. So as soon as we set it to false, we'll never be able to set and shoot another bullet. So we need a way of making sure that the bullet or the can shoot value becomes true again so that we can shoot another bullet. And we're basically going to do this with a timer, or in GameMaker we call them an alarm. So we're going to set an alarm, and there's several alarms built in that you can set to whatever you want. And basically when that alarm goes off, we will reset the can shoot to be true again so that next time it comes through, you can shoot another bullet. So to set an alarm, you simply use the word alarm, and we actually use the square brackets here because this is actually part of what's called an array, something we might talk about later, but we can put a 0 in there and we're basically saying it's alarm number 0 basically. And we're going to set it to a value. Now, short bit of information, in GameMaker, by default, it takes about 30, what they call steps in a second. So it's sort of like 30 cycles in a second, roughly. So if I wanted to shoot every second approximately, I would set my alarm to be 30, and that would give me approximately 1 real second. So we're going to start with that for the moment. So that alarm number 0 is now set to the value 30, and as soon as we set it, it essentially starts counting down in the background. Okay, nothing else we need to do there. We still haven't used the else, we may not, but let's just leave it for a second. So we've set our alarm off and it's going, counting down, but we now need to add an event for the alarm. So what do we do when the alarm goes off, basically? So here's our alarm 0 that we referred to. As you can see, there's 11 alarms per object. So alarm 0. And simply what we want to do is, first of all, when the alarm goes off, we really just want to put that value can shoot back to being true. So the alarm goes off, we set the value back to true, so the next time we press the space button or the next time it checks the space button, it's going to say, yep, it's true again, create another bullet, but we'll set the alarm again. Basically, we have another second delay, and then the can shoot becomes true again, and so forth. So we basically created this sort of looping system. So let's have a go. So you remember before, when we held down the space key, we just had a stream of constant bullets coming out. Let's get rid of that one. But now as I hold down the space key, you can see there is a delay between the bullets. I've got a nice 1 second delay. Now that might be a bit too much of a delay. And the great thing is we can easily change that just by changing our alarm value. So again, in our space bar, so we can just change this alarm value to something smaller. So maybe we'll make it 15 seconds. Sorry, 15 steps, I should say, not seconds. So about half of an actual second. Okay. There's one more thing that I think is very, very important to do at this point, and that is to actually destroy our bullets when they go off the screen. So again, just jumping in the room for a moment, when this bullet flies across the screen and it technically goes off the screen, as this picture indicates, they still exist. Now, the problem with that is that if we keep shooting bullets off the screen, each bullet takes a little bit of resources from our computer, so slowly our computer will slow down to a point where it actually might crash. So the game would crash and possibly crash the whole computer, runs out of memory and so forth. So really what we want to do is when these go off the screen, out of the viewable area, we want to destroy these instances so they're not taking up that memory anymore. So the way we're going to do that is back in the bullet itself, we're going to add an event, and that event is going to be a special one that comes from other, and it's going to be this one that says outside room. So it's a special event that happens that when this particular object or this instance, goes outside of the room, it triggers this event and we can then do something there. And because it's only ever going to go outside the room on the far right hand side, that will work for us. If you were possibly moving around and turning and stuff as well, shooting in all sorts of directions, that may not always be the best way to do it, but in our case, we'll use the outside room. And all we need to do here is run a very simple command called destroy, and it does have brackets around it, but you don't put anything in these particular brackets, and that command simply says to destroy itself. So we are the bullet, we can see that we are the bullet up here, and we're basically destroying ourself at this point. All right, gets rid of it basically. So nothing too special about that one. We'll close this off, and now we can play it. Actually, let's finally get rid of this bullet that we don't actually need. That's better, and we'll play our game. Now, we're not going to be able to see that those bullets are being destroyed necessarily. There are ways to show it that we might look at a later time. But for now, the main thing is that we're not going to get any errors. Oh, I have made a mistake, sorry. It should be instance underscore destroy. Okay, that's better. So that's going to destroy the particular instance of what we're doing. Let's try that again. Run the game. So now we've got a slightly smaller delay. Our bullets are going off the screen. We're not getting an error, so we're assuming at the moment that the destroy is actually happening. And basically, yeah, we can move up and down shooting as we go. And we've basically got that ability there. So we've added some shooting in. So far though, we don't have anything to shoot at, so that's coming up obviously in a very soon video. I think that should be it for now, so go ahead and have a go at adding in your own shooting. As always, you might want to change the sprites a little bit, but try and keep it kind of similar so that you can follow along with the tutorial.